There are only 9 nuclear-armed countries in the world. India, Pakistan, Israel, and North Korea are among those countries that possess nuclear weapons but have not ratified the Non-Proliferation Treaty or NPT. North Korea withdrew from the treaty in 2023 and they have nuclear weapons illegally. North Korea and South Korea have been at war and North Korea has threatened South militarily through a missile and nuke. The fundamental issue is that South Korea is devoid of nuclear weapons. Additionally, the US is a factor in the military might of modern-day Korea. The North Korean nuclear threat cannot be effectively confronted by South Korea on its own. Namely, Korea should rely on the US armed forces. The idea that South Korea needs nuclear power to take the weight of the issue over the impending nuclear war by itself has been advocated recently in South Korea, as North Korea is preparing for its 7th nuclear test. However, the international society's repulsion over it is not to be sneezed at. As a result, we can discover more about the nuclear power plants in South and North Korea. The Cold War marked a period of ever-escalating tensions between the US and the Soviet Union's nuclear arms race to gain the upper hand of the supremacy over the world. Actually, the case that the US bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945 was to end World War II on the face of it. However, the real intention was to keep the Soviet Union in check and show strength. However, the dissolution of the Soviet Union resulted in the end of the Cold War and the beginning of a peaceful time. The international agreement to no longer build nuclear bombs was created. The so-called Non-Proliferation Treaty stipulated that only the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, France, and China are permitted to possess nuclear weapons, or other countries are prohibited from doing so. Instead, the states with nuclear weapons have to share the benefit of the technology of atomic bombs and automatically try to dispose of nuclear weapons. The nations are viewed as not to be evaluated with an irrational judgment because they are the big power along with the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. Personally, I doubt that. North Korea, which signed the NPT, couldn't own it. However, they started making it secretly in the 1990s. Eventually, they withdrew from the treaty and kept it illegally and officially. Also, they tested nuclear bombs 6 times since 2006. The reason why they keep making it is simple, because of the utility of nuclear weapons. In all circumstances, that North Korea has been de facto isolated in the world. They boast the gut to develop nuclear weapons for the sake of their security. Virtually, the only thing is that North Korea believes and relies on its nuclear weapons. The bone of contention is that South Korea that has been at war with North Korea and South Korea doesn't have nuclear weapons. Given that they both possess nuclear weapons and have been at war for a very long period, India and Pakistan are able to defend their own nations from one another. However, Korea doesn't have any nuclear weapons. To make matters worse, the US has had current wartime operational control. In other words, even if Korea has an atomic weapon, it cannot detonate it without US sanction and permission when war breaks out because the US commands Korea's army. Of course, systemically, the ROK-US Combined Forces Command, where the Republic of Korea and the US military are together, is said to have the OPCON. But the US military actually has it. The US has never approved of South Korea having nuclear weapons. They claim that South Korea's nuclear armament would result in a nuclear domino effect in Northeast Asia and menace non-proliferation and security all over the world. Actually, South Korea has experimented with concealing nuclear weapons. After the United States forces were about to leave Korea in 1917, Park Chung-hee's administration wanted to acquire nuclear weapons to counter North Korea's threats. Donald Gregg, the head of the CIA's Korea chapter, was aware of this, and in 1973, he eventually stopped it. The US spoke that Korea would get on top of burning its bridge with the US and be sanctioned internationally. In particular, Henry Kissinger, who served as a Secretary of State and advisor on national security issues, put pressure on South Korea to accept and cease nuclear weapon development. Eventually, Korea joined the NPT in 1975. To assuage Korea's concerns about security, the U.S. delayed its intention to leave the USFK and made a commitment to increase the range of its nuclear arsenal. The popular opinion in South Korea is shifting toward the idea that the country should have its own nuclear arsenal, despite the fact that Korea should solely rely on the United States for protection. In particular, according to the result of the Korean Institute for Unification in 2021, 71.3% of the respondents approved of independent nuclear armament. Also, there is a growing public opinion in the US too to diminish the burden of the US defense cost in East Asia. In particular, President Trump made a very positive remark on South Korea's independent nuclear armament to reduce the burden of the US defense cost. Historically, nations with nuclear weapons caused many low-intensity conflicts, but these conflicts are unlikely to escalate into large-scale wars, and they are likely to achieve their desired goals in a crisis with nuclear-free adversaries. In fact, North Korea has attacked the 5 West Sea islands which are on South Korea's border with North Korea, repeatedly warning South Korea not to try to work over us because of its nuclear capabilities. Namely, given this situation that South Korea couldn't retaliate, North Korea caused many low-intensity conflicts continuously. This so-called stability-instability paradox led South Koreans assent to be armed with their own nuclear weapons. Additionally, the U.S. exit from Afghanistan and hesitation in intervening in the Ukraine war have increased Korea's concern that the U.S. cannot provide South Korea with total protection. A nuclear weapon is not a tool for nuclear war. However, it is a part of the defense that the adversary cannot attack. What are the consequences of South Korea's nuclear armament? In addition, who will defend South Korea if the war breaks out? So thank you for watching this video, and please don't forget to click the subscribe and the like button.